Curtis, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem, my friend. Good to be with you.
All right, you guys do this for a living, so I need to get your take, little sanity check, because maybe I'm just being a little too sensitive today. But I felt like the election coverage was like normal left-wing legacy media. They overlooked like all of these associations. They were like, despite the text that Jay Jones sent, it wasn't like he sent a text like, "Hey, do you want to go to lunch?" And Zoran Mandami hangs out with terrorists, and they were like, they celebrated these guys and not acknowledged who they really were. Maybe I'm being sensitive, but I just felt like they were getting a pass on the left for all these people. If this was the right, they'd say Republicans tonight are elected far right-wing crazy nut jobs. And they were like, Zoran Mandami's having a great night. And I'm like, okay, but he's a crazy leftist, terrorized, sympathizing communist.
Yeah, let's work backwards on here. On the labeling, you're exactly right. I mean, this moderate nonsense with Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill. Yes, compared to Zoran Mamdani, obviously, they are not like fellow communists talking about seizing the means of production and globalize the intifada. But, it's more about they dress it up in a nice way. Abigail Spanberger's ads, you saw them, Sean. She was talking about, we want the best schools and we want to take politics out of schools. And I serve this country and I'm all about service. It was the kind of folksy, moderate hoodwink nonsense that we've come to know and see from everybody from Abigail Spanberger to Mark Warner to even people like little Chris Coons over the years. And voters just bought that. Expectations. Virginia and New Jersey, I think a lot of Republicans, just because of how well the president did last year, historically well, and how, again, historically well and well run and much of a unicorn Governor Youngkin was in 2021, people just have these unrealistic expectations about Virginia and New Jersey. Some of us are old enough to remember 2017 and 2013 and other previous Virginia gubernatorial elections in particular that did not go well for Republicans, regardless of how good the candidate was, Ed Gillespie, or the flaws, or how close certain people got, like Ken Cuccinelli, and the prevalence of the third party in that year. But just a variety of factors should lead people to conclude that Democrats were supposed to win. They did win. The Jay Jones part is the most disturbing thing, obviously, because the media definitely downplayed this on the national broadcast networks that we saw. There were maybe two pieces on mentions on Meet the Press, one on ABC's This Week, one or two on Nightly News, and maybe one on CBS. But all told, if you add all those things up, it was probably less than 3 or 4 minutes before Election Day. And so because of that, it's not really in the public zeitgeist about what Jay Jones did. And as you point out, when they do talk about it, it was very much downplayed and minimized to make it seem like he just called someone an idiot instead of, I'm going to kill these people and I'm going to kill their kids.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this conversation, but if you're looking for a way to get to sleep tonight and stay asleep, I've got the answer for you. For over a year, I've been taking Beam's Dream Powder. It has made a world of difference. I fall asleep faster, I stay asleep, and I wake up ready to go. If you want to join me by taking one scoop every night before you get to bed, go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer at checkout for up to 40% off. Trust me, everything stems from a great night's sleep. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer, code word Spicer. All right, back to the conversation. And don't fall asleep yet. And I look at what's going on every time someone on the right meets with somebody, right? President Trump had dinner with Nick Fuentes back in the day. Nobody could, he had to know, and this was a big deal. Okay, and everybody downplayed the possibility. I mean, if you think about the circumstances, and maybe he should have known or not, I'm not debating that. But then you have Zoran Mandami palling around with unindicted co-conspirators from 9/11, and no one in the media, that in, of all places, New York City,
no mentions,
should be a big deal. Someone should say, here's the guy who's doing it. A Republican meets with anybody, and they say, do you know who that person is, and how did they possibly associate with them? And yet, here's Zoran Mandami literally palling around with terrorist sympathizers, and it's actually almost the opposite, which is, the guy really wasn't actually ever indicted. And it's like, okay.
Or politicians meet with a lot of people, those kinds of excuses. I mean, the double standard here is so stark. And I'm glad you brought that up in terms of bias by omission. You know this too, Sean, that sometimes the worst kind of bias you get from the liberal elite media is the stories that aren't covered, the things that you don't see. And in that case, that told and spoke 1,000 words for what the liberal media were willing to do. They downplayed Zohran Mamdani. They had a little bit of love for him after he won the primary, but otherwise it kind of tampered down. Obviously, candidate quality matters as well. Andrew Cuomo, Curtis Silva, it was two really not great options for people who didn't want to vote for Zohran Mamdani. Winsome Sears was a huge drag on the ticket. She was way behind on the money race in Virginia as well. Chitterelli was definitely more of a disappointment because the thinking was that it could be close. He almost won last time with very little national support from the GOP apparatus. I do have to say, though, yes, while there are lessons and Republicans shouldn't rest on their laurels, the liberal media, as usual, Sean, take the very elementary view of things, believing that this is a harbinger, this is a clarion call for Democrats, that this is going to be a blue tsunami next year. The world, for all we know, is going to be a completely different place, and you cannot allow the George Stephanopoulos of the world to defeat and kind of beat you into submission and try to lower your expectations for next year.
I agree. I mean, I've been saying this for a while, whether or not we won or not. The idea that you're going to extrapolate 2 states in a year before an election and say this is how they did. Candidate quality does matter. I actually agree with your assessment. Chitterelli to me was the disappointment because he actually had seemingly run a good campaign. Winsome didn't raise the money. She wasn't campaigning effectively. Youngkin, I don't think, did his job. In fact, he probably, screwed things up a bit in terms of party unity by making a faux controversy regarding John Reed, the lieutenant governor. But I like the point you make about somehow Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey are branded immediately as moderates. What I don't understand, and that's the new talking point. They're the moderates. Yes, your point is well taken, maybe compared to Mamdani. But these are folks that voted with Pelosi 99% of the time. They support all of the trans agenda. In Virginia, Spanberger would refuse to discuss her position about this because, again, I think that she's been very clear about her support for it. They're not moderates. The press wants to help them by branding them moderates.
Exactly. And because they know that going to the far left outside of New York City is toxic. Yes, okay, it's a very low bar to clear that Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger aren't going to be bringing government-run grocery stores to New Jersey and Virginia or make buses free statewide, obviously. But they're still going to be doing all kinds of things. There are answers on the transgender issues you brought up, the gerrymander, the possible 10-to-1 split that Virginia Democrats, if they really wanted to go for broke, could very well draw out all Republicans except Morgan Griffin in the South, West Virginia. I mean, it's disgusting what's going to happen here. And I think the undermentioned part of this last night is now that Virginia Democrats in the House of Delegates have over 60 seats. I believe it's going to be something like 64 seats by the time it's said and done out of 100, which, again, could reach extinction levels if Republicans aren't willing to regroup for next year and the year after that, because, it could get bad really quick. And, all the moniker jokes that we may make about California, bringing California to Virginia, we'll see in January what the Democrats do here. And it's concerning, too, with Jay Jones in this era of political threats, political violence, what he will do in terms of being the top prosecutor in Virginia if, God forbid, something like another Charlie Kirk assassination happened, what he would do to defend, people he disagrees with.
No, he'll defend the indefensible. I mean, I think we've seen it. I mean, the guy kicked a dog yesterday, Curtis. There's a video of
unbelievable kicking
a dog. The funny part is you mentioned what's going on in Virginia, which I find appalling in the sense that, look, both sides gerrymander. I don't, to me, this idea that it's bad. But what Virginia did was sneaky, meaning that Virginia had early voting started in September. People cast their vote for the House of Delegates. And then days before the election, they had a special election to comply with Virginia law, which allows you, it says you have to pass something in one session of the General Assembly, have an election intervene, and then pass it again. And so they were like, hey, we can be cute by half. And that's how they're going to redistrict. And I think that was a travesty because Virginia voters didn't realize that was on the ballot. And so that's the thing. You talk about this, though. I was listening to Gavin Newsom. he keeps referring to the win in California because the Republicans and President Trump were rigging the election. They get away with that. If Republicans use the word rig, we get called out for it. That's ridiculous. That's undermining democracy, et cetera, et cetera. When Gavin Newsom uses the word rig, it's like, oh, yeah, I guess it's different when you guys do it.
Well, yeah, and also the talk that we've seen on places like The View and MSNBC or MS Now, as of a few Saturdays from now, talking about canceling the election. President Trump using the National Guard and all these blue cities as a dry run to somehow cancel elections. And, I guess these victories mean that he'll definitely try to cancel the elections. And again, if my boss Tim Graham were sitting here, he would say, where are the fact checkers on this? They're never going to be fact checked when they use the R word about rigged or talking about canceling the elections or ending our democracy. This kind of incendiary, doomsday, apocalyptic rhetoric is only going to further inflame their own base. And of course, as I've just said, it's not based in reality at all.
No. I guess the question, though, is that, it's funny, you guys at the Media Research Center and Newsbusters called these guys out. But Nancy Pelosi was on, she did this interview on CNN, and she said Trump is the greatest threat because he's destroying the courts and he's gotten rid of the House of Representatives. And the reporter didn't push back. I mean, those are demonstrably false things. They're not true, right? For obvious reasons. The court is 6-3, so it's obviously leans conservative. The House of Representatives controlled by the Republicans. I don't find this shocking, but to lie and to say he got rid of them or he destroyed them, and the reporter didn't push it back. So the question I have for you is, have we become numb to the media's bias, or should we be calling it out more?
I think especially when it comes to dangerous incendiary rhetoric like this, talking about fascism, comparing Republicans to Nazis, these kinds of things require vigorous pushback. Need to talk about how this kind of language is unacceptable in our body politic. Just as we're having the family discussion about anti-Semitism, I think on the left, you have to be so strenuous, you have to be forceful, because this kind of thing is not acceptable. Because as we know, words matter. The left tells us that all the time. Well, if words do matter, we need to be going around and talking about not necessarily censoring, but we need to be calling it out and creating an incentive structure for people to not want to listen to this kind of thing. And thankfully, in places like late night comedies, we found where 95% of the New York City mayoral race comments and jokes were about Silwa and Cuomo, not Mamdani. It's not a moneymaker. We saw with Colbert's cancellation, the reports from Dylan Byers and Puck and others that they're losing over $100 million a year. And I'm sure Jimmy Kimmel probably isn't printing money either. So fortunately, that segment of the liberal media apparatus is falling apart. Now we just kind of need to see what happens with some of these other places as well, as the newspapers obviously have fallen away for a long time as well, except for maybe like the New York Times.
All right, I said that because I was watching President Trump on CBS 60 Minutes, and you have to watch the whole clip, which the White House posted, not the 27 minutes they edited. Here's an exchange he had with Norah O'Donnell on crime, though, that I thought was absolutely fascinating, and to the point that I asked you. Take a look at how he addressed the issue of crime.
But we're cleaning up our cities. I campaigned on crime, but I've done a much better job on crime than I thought. The crime numbers are way down, even though we have a lot more people in our country that really shouldn't be here, and many of them are stone cold, hard criminals. When I look at D.C. now, you can walk down the middle of the street. You can have your daughter, who's 10 years old, meet you at the park. She's going to be okay.
In certain parts of D.C.
Well,
I live in D.C.
Well,
certain parts
you tell me. How big a difference is D.C. now compared to what it was a year ago, right? I mean, you have to be honest with me. People in the White House, they walk up to me, young ladies I've never seen, sir, thank you very much. I know they don't even have to tell me what they're thanking me for. But when I ask why, he said, one girl said, I'd get into Uber, and I felt dangerous even in Uber. They'd attack the car, okay? It wasn't even safe then. Sir, I now walk to work every day, and I'm so safe. There's nothing going to happen, 100% safe. And you know that too, Nora.
I want to ask you about this.
You live here. You know that too.
I want to ask you about
Do you see a difference?
American
Do you
cities
see a difference?
in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
I think I've been working too hard. I haven't been out and about that much.
Oh, that's not a fair answer. You see a difference.
I get in my car and go to work and I go home.
You don't have to use that one. Don't worry. Don't worry. I don't want to embarrass you.
I've been working too hard.
It's like, you know what the difference is? Like day and night.
So, Curtis, I appreciate you guys posting that at Media Research Center. But the beauty was, let me start with the proposition. Mr. President, crimes, only in certain neighborhoods. Okay, Nora, do you see it? Well, I don't really get out. So I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Then when he calls her on it, and he wouldn't, what I loved about this, because most politicians won't do this, he kept going. Tell me, do you see it? Do you see it? Because she said it factually. It's not in all neighborhoods, Mr. President. And he said, well, do you see it? Well, I don't actually know it because I probably get chauffeur driven to work every day. Right. So that's the missing piece in this, Curtis. She said it factually. This is not true. And when he called her out on it, she was like, well, I actually don't know the truth.
Yeah, isn't that incredible? You know, this is the way how the president has completely revolutionized the way that Republicans should engage with the liberal media the very few times that they actually do. You know, Nora O'Donnell tried to swat away his point when he brought up crime in D.C. by saying, well, I don't know, only in certain neighborhoods. But he kept going, as you point out. He kept hammering and hammering and hammering. You would often see this probably in your many years dealing with the press. Journalists would say, well, that's not for me to say if you tried to ask them a question. But the president kept getting after her. And then she, as you pointed, she changed her tone by saying, well, I work too hard. John, she doesn't anchor the CBS Evening News anymore. She doesn't have like a consistent show. She's not hosting a streaming show. She's not hosting 60 Minutes. I mean, yeah, she has a book that's coming out.
I didn't even think of, by the way, I didn't even think of that aspect of it, Curtis. You're absolutely right.
No, she's not even, so it's not like she has like a regular show to do. I mean, she's already written the book. The book is, being printed for early next year or later this year. So it's not like she has like a steady day job where she goes to work and is in meetings and then on camera all the time, sitting in a studio. The entire point of getting rid of that is so that she can kind of jet set travel all around the world and spend more time with her kids. So that ostensibly would put her more out there. And her husband, Jeff Tracy, runs restaurants in DC. So, I mean, she's married to someone who is in touch and has to be in touch with kind of the mood and the vibe of the city.
And the safety. And the safety.
So he learns to that.
Right. I mean, do you not think at some point, like considering DC, you're bringing up a lot of points that I didn't even think of, right? So let's be honest. She says, first of all, she lies, right? Because she says the crime isn't in every neighborhood. And then he says, well, what about you? And she goes, well, I actually don't know because I don't see anything because I get driven back and forth. Secondly, to your point, what are you actually so busy on doing? Because you got a lot of your responsibility slipped away. So what is it that you do? And then third, to your point, and I don't like to bring in spouses to this discussion, but you're right. Her husband has a plethora of very good restaurants in the DC area. I would imagine that this is a guy who comes home and says, you're not going to believe this. It's so much safer on the streets. More people are coming in. More people are commenting that they can walk in or out. I mean, like, right? I have asked that when I've gone to, right. So it's just funny how that never happened. But again, this is why I was asking you about calling it out, because I don't think the average person, and our exchange is emblematic of this. Like, I didn't think of the things that you just called out. And I'm like, wow, that's even more true than I thought for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. I want to talk to you about Corinne Jean-Pierre, not because I want to, but because I think she did a series of interviews on this failed book, which, by the way, we need to congratulate her for cracking the top 25,000 of all books last week. That's a huge feat. But she was doing a series of interviews, and as you know, she kept getting called out for leading every interview with, well, as a black queer woman, right? And enough people were noticing the pattern. Finally, she brought it up, Curtis. I want to play you what she had to say to people who have noticed this pattern of how she starts every interview. Take a look.
Pisses me off that people who have not walked in my shoes, who have no idea who really I am as a person, get to tell me how I get to identify myself or not. So it's like, shut up. I was like, you can't tell me how I get to identify myself. You can't tell me how I get to call myself. Like, screw you. Like, that's not okay. Like, that is not okay. You have no right to tell anybody how they should identify themselves and how they see themselves in the world. Like, you have not walked through my battles. You have not walked through my life. You don't even know my personal story. So that's how that just boils me up.
That was like that old, you don't know me. But here's the point. I think that there's a difference. We're pointing out the fact that she began every interview. If she began every interview by saying, like, I just want to start by, like Kamala Harris, we called out the fact that she kept saying 107 days as if that was the reason she lost, right? We're calling out the obvious, which is she starts every interview by saying, well, as a queer black woman. And it's like, okay, somehow that's how you're starting every interview. That's a pattern that is being discussed. She has every right to say it. I'm not saying she can't, but I think it's kind of obvious that, like, she wants to lead with that everywhere she goes.
Yeah, we as conservatives believe you can say what you want, but that doesn't absolve you then from us ridiculing you. Karine Jean-Pierre is if you created someone in a DEI lab with all sorts of mishigas and all the sort of jargon, and you just rolled them out and tried to see how well that goes in the public. I read her book. It was so flimsy. It was only 172 pages. I mean, just absolutely remarkable. As I said in my review at Newsbusters, it was vapid. It was empty. It was the single worst political book I've ever read. It was so disorganized. She starts going after Nancy Pelosi, but then leaves it by the wayside to start talking about the infrastructure law and the PACT Act and all these other pieces of legislation passed during the Biden presidency. And then she returns to Nancy Pelosi. So just in terms of her structural or lack of editing, it was just so elementary. And she was so divisive as well. And you could tell in that clip, she was so dismissive of people who try to raise any sort of criticism of her. She tries to make it about race when really it's about her competency. So much of what you have is, Sean, at a podium or just talking to reporters, is your respect and your credibility and your command of the facts. It was clear that the White House press corps did not respect her. You watch so many times during the Biden years, the press were willing to be on her side, but they just wanted some, bread and crumbs to work with. And she could not do that because every briefing was a heavyweight bout with the English language. Whereas when John Kirby was at the podium, he answered questions. She may not have liked his answer, but he gave answers, and you could tell the press corps respected him and they got along with him because Karine just seemed like a very nasty person. She writes about how conservatives in her book would come, random conservatives, and Peter Doocy and others were nice to her. And she scoffs at that, is saying that these people must have ulterior motives, that these people must not really mean it or something like that, because, they're trying to throw me off, instead of considering the fact that we're willing to see inherent value in all human beings, regardless of their political beliefs. And that just goes to the incendiary and insidious nature of the way the far left operates.
Dude, I love that. First of all, thank you for reading it so I don't have to. Because I normally will read almost any political book just to kind of get a perspective on somebody else's take. But thank you, because I've heard this now twice, that this is just a joke of a book. So thank you for saving me some time. But the irony is that, oh my God, they're nice, so they must have some other motive. Anyway, Curtis, thank you for being with us. I appreciate everything you guys over at Newsbusters and the Media Research Center do to call out the hypocrisy, the bias, and everything else. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Sean.
You bet. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.